everyone. We are streaming the audio live. This is Andy Stack. I'm currently the chair of the CA Board of Directors. I would like to call the roll for all the board members. Milton?
Here.
Ginny?
Yes, here.
Janet?
Here.
Shari?
Yes.
Dick?
I'm here.
Lynn?
Here.
Nancy? I know Nancy was here. So, Rafia?
Here.
Alan?
Present and accounted for.
Renee?
Present.
Okay, everybody's here. Thank you all for coming. Just to remind everyone that, please mute your phones and speak slowly and clearly so you can be heard. And when you jump in, if you could just announce your name so people know who is talking. Want to do the closed meetings. There were two on April 6th. The board of directors held a closed work session. In attendance was the entire board. The vote to close was 8-0. Those voting against were Dick and Renee. Meeting was closed under section 1 and 4 of the HOA Act. 1 is discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 4 is consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. Meeting was closed at 4:05 p.m. and opened at 4:50 p.m. And the purpose of the meeting was to discuss issues related to the coronavirus situation. There was a second closed work session of the board on April 16th. All board members were present, and Shari joined us a couple minutes after the meeting started. The vote to close was 6-3, with Renee, Dick, and Alan opposing. It was closed under the same sections 1 and 4. Discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. Work session was closed at 4:34 and opened at 5:28 p.m. And the purpose was to discuss issues related to the coronavirus situation. Okay, would someone like to move approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Jenny,
So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Janet seconded, right? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Actually, I wanted to amend one item which I spoke to you, Andy, regarding the payment option for annual charge.
Well, we can talk about that under the operating budget.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll take the roll call in favor of the motion. Ginny,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Shari,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Rafia,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Andy, yes. Okay, thank you.
Andy, point
Yes.
of whatever. Why not do voice votes and only do roll call if it's any question, anybody calls for one, or if there's any question?
I can do that.
Yeah, good idea.
Thanks, Al.
Of course, it's probably the only vote we'll have since this is a work session, but.
No, this is a meeting.
No, there's a meeting. There's a meeting. Never mind.
There's a meeting.
Never mind.
Hopefully we're going to have a couple of votes. All right. Let's move on then to board votes. proposed modifications of the fiscal year 2021 capital budget. Milton, is there anything you'd like to start with?
Well, Susan and Lynn is going to lead the discussion. I'll chime in probably often.
Susan?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully you can see the backup that was presented. I know that from meetings I've been having since we've been working remotely that it's hard to hear me on this microphone. So I would ask if you would please mute your phones unless you're speaking, or you will not hear me. So this is a very similar schedule to what you saw on April 9th. We added the reasons, or kind of the impact of the proposed amendment. You may be wondering what changed since then. And we changed a couple things. We reduced the total from 8.4 to 8 million. Added back in
Lynn, you need to mute your thing.
We added back in the IT capital request because it really is for equipment that's at the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced. And to accommodate that, we reduced both the Cat 3 allocation, Columbia-wide pathways slightly, and I think the facility equipment. But those are minor changes to what we have. So I hope you had a chance to look at this. I don't know if you want me to walk you through it line item by line item, or do you want me to just
Well, let's just ask questions. I can go through the roster for everybody. Renee, any questions about the capital proposal? Renee?
Sorry, I was muted.
Sure. Any questions about the capital?
I don't have a question about the capital. I have a comment.
Sure.
I'm going to be voting against this budget because I think that having a capital budget of almost $8 million and not improving the cash position of this organization in what might be a very tumultuous year is somewhat irresponsible. And I'm just going to make that statement.
Okay. Alan, any questions?
Well, my question now is of Renee. I know you said you're just going to make that statement, but not all of us are as financially literate as you.
Well,
so I'm not completely sure of the connection. I'd like to know what you would propose, not in detail, but what do you propose otherwise?
Well, what I see is a year of uncertainty ahead. And if you read the Wall Street Journal and other news articles, they are talking about how companies are squirreling away their cash because of the uncertainty in the market. Last year, I said that it was difficult for me to understand why CA maintained such a low cash position. And if we had worked on improving our cash position rather than spending money, things wouldn't be as tight as they were in April. I look at this, Alan, not as a business, although it is very much a business, but would you run your household this way? If you weren't sure if you were going to be laid off, would you spend everything you had and take out a loan on top of it?
And to improve the cash position, you would suggest that we...
Well, I don't know that we can improve the cash position today, but we certainly can reduce our borrowing over the next 12 months, or what we plan to borrow, because if things got a little bit tumultuous in the fall, et cetera, or we didn't have the same number of memberships, or we had to drop the membership fee, or any number of things happened, we would not have the ability to continue to draw down because we would be using it for our capital expenses. I feel like we need to be more financially conservative here because that's what, I mean, we're in the middle of a recession. And during a recession, people don't typically go out and spend money on new things. I understand
Thank you.
that borrowing rates are low.
So now my question is, Susan, is could you please respond to this? Preferably with your mute off.
Sorry about that. Maybe what we should do is sort of back up and talk about where we are as an organization. That maybe perhaps that would be more helpful. So I think everything that I'm reading and what I guess I've always believed is that effective leadership focuses on the organization first, keeping it alive and solvent, the employees second, because of how important they are to the organization. And currently we need to acknowledge the pain and uncertainty many of them are experiencing. And then we turn to our customers and make sure that they stay engaged and that we're compassionate and we keep them engaged and help them as much as possible. And then we look at the shareholders, which for us, I think, is our other community stakeholders like the villages and vendors and other community partners. So where we are as an organization, when the organization's financial well-being, we have made significant reductions in expenses. We've done an amazing job, I think, as a team. We're making progress on the new financing that's, I think, getting us to a better banking relationship than we had. The loan was approved through the one level of review. We have document preparation underway, and I think we're going to intentionally move to early May for the closing. Bank of America is satisfied with the progress. We are well under the scheduled borrowing from April. That was maximum of 18 million. We're at 9.2 right now on April 23rd. And we have some other, we've submitted an idle loan. We haven't heard anything about that. And we've requested rent abatements, and we haven't heard on those. So we've done, I think, a great job for the organization. Your employees, your team members, many of them got really hard news last week or 2 weeks ago almost, and they responded amazingly graciously. Overall, the team members who are still working are working remotely as much as possible. We've been answering questions about their situations, how we can help them with filing for unemployment. We had far fewer questions than we expected, excuse me. And I think that's in large part due to the great materials. So we're focus is shifting, as you would expect, I think, to reopening and what does that look like? What are workforce safety and training considerations, et cetera. We did not bill, and other health and fitness organizations did continue to bill. We did not. We chose to stop immediately. So we didn't bill for memberships in March and April, and we would not bill for periods that were closed. We just won't do it. We're processing credits and refunds for school-age services and camps, and some membership freezes and answering people's questions. And we've been putting a lot of energy into virtual content, virtual community content to fitness, art, children's activities. It's been very well received. And again, we're focusing and attention also on what reopening looks like. So on the shareholders or the stakeholder side, we've been investing significant high-level staff resources into the villages. We've been participating in Howard County emergency response, working with vendors, collaborating with partner entities. And we are, we think that we have a good plan. We have capital budget. We can't not do any capital because there are things that has to be maintained and done. We have the resources for that. We have two operating budget proposals to share with you that show you how thoughtful this has been and to get your leadership on. And I think this already showed, and we rerun the cash flow, which projections, which Lynn got finished about 6:45 this evening, and you know, they're decent. I don't feel Renee's I've been very conservative about this. I think that so I just think that people respond differently to different situations, and I feel like what we've done is solid, responsible, and conservative.
Andy, could I say something?
And Jenny,
Jenny?
Yeah.
Jenny,
Okay.
Yeah.
One, I see this as if we approve this budget, which is considerably less than we originally saw, so it's quite reduced. If we approve this, that doesn't mean you have to spend it if we wind up with another crisis or something, right? That's question one. Two, I'm looking over this a lot. This is really safety. For example, pathway renovations, we have to do that. Bridge replacements, that's a safety issue. We have to do that. So if you look down here, a lot of what we are going to be doing is more safety issues to keep our facilities safe places to go. I don't see how we avoid doing that, quite frankly. Parking lot. You just have to do some things that are really necessary so that we don't wind up with hazards and people getting hurt using our pathways. Or so that's basically the way I'm looking at it. I think you've really done an excellent job of paring down what was a $15 million budget to $8 million. So I want to congratulate the staff on getting to this point. And as I say, we approve it. It could change. We could be back. Somebody could be back next month having to change things, or the following month because we just don't have the money. But right now, I think you've done a great job, staff.
And excuse me, Andy, this is Susan again. Could I just clarify one other thing? So we are tracking and really monitoring and limiting the capital spending that we're doing now. So I'm sure, some of you probably noticed on the Q3 financial report, there was over $10 million of FY20 and prior capital dollars that are still unspent. And we're looking at deferring more than half of that, and some of it will never be spent. So, look at our cash flow. So the reduction in the capital budget is not just from 15 to 8. There's another 10 to 5 that is at least deferred beyond FY21, if not eliminated altogether.
and Andy.
Yes, Milton.
And also to respond to Alan is that I very much, I consider myself to be a side on being fiscal conservative, but I think we need to also look at this, what we've done with the capital budget, well, the revised capital budget, from the point of view is that just roughly 3 years ago, we had a $20 million capital budget. So this revised capital budget is actually $12 million less than what the board approved approximately 2 or 3 years ago, when we had two straight fiscal years when we had a $20 million capital budget. And we have to acknowledge we have a lot of facilities and infrastructure, and they're aging. So we have to take this gradual approach right now to address those. And admittedly, it's to the tune of $8 million, but it's needed.
Okay, so I heard, I thought it was still my question time
Sure,
here.
Alan.
So I hear that it's less than we had, a lot less. I hear and I don't mean this pejoratively, a claim or an assertion made by Ginny that we don't, just because we thought I heard you say, just because we borrow it, we don't have to spend it. I want to check out, Susan, if that's true. And, I still haven't heard a real answer to Renee's question, or her assertion, if you will, that we ought to be building up cash if we can, that we don't know what this next year is going to come from. So why in the world would we be borrowing money that we would have to pay back when we have no idea what our money situation is going to be.
Andy, can I jump in here?
Yes, Dick?
I understand where Renee's coming from. Yes, we are looking at some very complex times, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But this is not a household budget. This is a corporation that has over $100 million in assets, and we have borrowed money before. We've been much further into debt than we are now. So we have some wiggle room here. And as Ginny pointed out, if situation, we're flexible, and if the situation changes, we have a fallback position. We can cut additional expenses if we need to. But I look at this and I see a well thought out budget. I think we've cut a lot. We've cut more than fat out of it. We've cut some muscle and bone out of it, and I think it's a conservative budget. And I'm not concerned about the future. One other point I'd like to make is in Susan's hierarchy there, because
excuse me, Dick, before you go on to another topic, I mean, Andy was trying to go down the list. Renee was first. For whatever reason, I was second. I had a question, and I know that others want to get in their questions. I'm not sure it's your turn.
I'm responding to a point that was made earlier, and that is Susan had given us a hierarchy of responsibilities here and put the organization first. And for the kind of organization we are, the organization is not first. The customer is first. Our residents, our members, they're first. And we support them by supporting the organization and our employees and whatever other stakeholders there may be. But it's a real mistake to put the corporation first. And I'm finished for now.
All right. Rafael, do you have any questions? Capital budget? Nancy, do you have any questions on the capital budget?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got both the phone on and the, hold on a second. Wait a second. Let me do this so that you don't
mute one of them.
You have to move. Nancy.
You need to mute your speaker, not your microphone.
Yeah, mute your
computer speaker.
Nancy, *6 to unmute your phone. Nancy, your phone is muted.
Wait a minute. I guess that's
what you need to mute is your computer speaker.
Oh, shoot. Hold on.
Okay, I'm doing this through the through my iPad. I read through this. I think that the changes that you've made are good. I think they're reasonable. I understand that the neighborhood centers had to go. Hopefully not next year, but at least this year. I'm happy to accept that. Well, not happy, but I'm willing. But I do have questions, and I don't know if it's going to come up later or if I do it now, but this is the budget conversation about why the annual charge is going to be reduced for the villages when we don't know that we're not going to get as much or even more than we anticipated from the annual charge.
Nancy, let's hold that for the next one, which is the operating budget, where the annual charge will come up.
But the problem is we're talking about the capital budget before we see what the operating budget looks like.
All right. Well, I just want to go through the questions if anybody has them. Lynn, do you have any questions?
That's my question. I don't have any more questions. I think it looks fine to me. And I think they did a great job. I'm surprised they could cut as much as they did.
Yeah, I think it's a very reasonable budget. It certainly cuts things that are not necessary, desirable, not necessary. And No, I think you all did a very good job. Thank you.
Shari, any questions on the capital budget?
Yes, I have just a couple of things for clarification. I see that parking lots are 350,000. There's a bridge replacement. What bridge are we talking about? And also the tennis is still a big chunk that's in there.
Great.
Couldn't parking lots and the bridge wait another year?
So the parking lots, we reduced it to 150, took 100,000 out of it. This is all of the parking lots that CA is responsible for, and just some of them. So we did defer what we could, but we feel that some of them really just cannot be deferred. And again, those are safety issues for the parking lots. The bridge, I'm not sure which bridge this is. We can find out. Maybe Dennis could answer that question. But then before you do, with the tennis, we talked a little bit about this last time. We can't reopen Hobbits Glen Tennis as is. And tennis is a pretty lucrative program. It's a very strong cash flowing program. And so the thought was to keep that one revenue producing project in here so that we could open that facility. So maybe Dennis, could you talk about which bridge that is?
Okay, it's not one bridge in particular. It's multiple bridges. You know, some are 20 foot, some are 30 foot. I can get you a list of those bridges. But this relates to the long-term replacement schedule, which we've been way behind. Most of our infrastructure was built early in Columbia's history, so it's all aging out at the same time. And that's why we didn't feel like we could cut money out of this, because it's a safety issue. I personally looked at some of the bridges, and if you get underneath them and take a look at the framing, it really is a safety issue.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that bridge that we were talking about over one of the major highways, and we had talked about putting a lot of money into that, and something like that I think we could definitely defer. But if it's a safety issue and there's a question of people getting hurt, that's a different question altogether. So I do understand what you're saying.
So Sherry, that would be described as an overpass. So these bridges are the bridges in the pathway system over the different streams.
Okay, so those are the wooden bridges that CA has in the pathway system.
Correct.
Okay, all right. I think that's a lot more clear. My other issue, as far as clarification is concerned, is that a lot of times when we talk about our assets, as we have learned, the assets are part of the valuation of the organization, but they are physical assets, and that's not liquidity. And I think one of the economic articles that I was reading, because I work with clients, is talking about a crisis in liquidity is always a crisis of credit. And more economists are looking at it that way. So that doesn't mean that CA is in a bad position or a more terrible position, compared to anyone else. But it does seem to point to the issue that organizations as a whole now are looking at getting off the credit course and moving towards building up cash reserves, both for environmental emergencies and for any other kinds of emergencies. And in some ways, this may be the consequence of environmental issues. So I would just like to ask the board to consider thinking more broadly about how that business model might have to change in the future. I also think you've done a very good job in terms of looking at the whole and making those cuts that really, really are necessary. So this is not as much of a criticism as it is a critique, and I hope a call to action within the next year. Thank you.
Janet, any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of comments and questions. So one, to Sherry and Renee's points, I think you were not on the board, but not that many years ago, there was discussion about cash reserves, at which point I know I was in favor of cash reserves and most of the board was not. So, and I think that to Susan's credit, I mean, the lending rates have been historically low in the past years. Obviously, no one can predict a pandemic, so I would also be supportive of taking a larger cash position. Having some sort of cash reserves going forward. And in the past, some of the arguments were this is just money, assessment payer money sitting there. But I think that this is the kind of unpredictable thing that comes up that, potentially questions that logic. So there's that. Two, I also wanted to say, like, if you look at Renee's household budget metaphor, if you had something like the roof leaking or your siding starting to peel, obviously you would take care of those things. And so I think, part of the problem with the capital budget is that there was there were a number of projects put off for too long, and then they became a bigger issue. And so, I'm hoping that with this particular budget that the things that can be put off have been put off, and those things that are assessed as necessary to prevent future issues are included in the budget. So, I mean, I'm also happy that we were able to get it down as much as we have. I would be supportive of cutting more because I agree that, we need to be careful at this point in time, but at the same time, there is ongoing maintenance that doesn't stop just because we have a challenge. And so we just want to make sure that we're not penny wise and pound foolish as far as that goes. My question is, so I'm assuming that any of the things that are put off now, so does this essentially like push out capital budgets going forward? So would we assume that these expenses that have been allocated in this fiscal year that are being postponed would then be in the queue and then, sort of in a domino effect, impact future capital projects?
I would say that they would be on the list to be considered, but I think everything will need to be continually reprioritized depending on how this situation evolves and depending on what the organization looks like, next year, or even what we think it's going to look like in the fall. So I wouldn't say that these are all moving to the 2022 budget and that moves forward. I think there's going to have to be some evaluation and reprioritization of those things.
Any other questions on the capital budget?
Is it possible that we would end up potentially, if things go well, following up on the last question, borrowing potentially up to twice as much as we would have, so in other words, combining 21 and 22 into 22?
I really doubt it. I don't see us being able to manage that from a operating budget standpoint or from a credit capacity standpoint. I wouldn't imagine that would be the case.
Well, also, Susan, we have to, and Dennis is out there. Alan, we also have to consider what we can schedule and complete over that time.
Yeah. Andy, I have Andy?
Jenny?
Yeah, just a quick question. If somebody can explain here, it says, staff is exploring permanent disinfecting solutions for the facilities that may require capital funds to implement. Do you have what is that? What do you have in mind? It's fascinating.
So those are some things that, sorry. So there are some things that are part of the HVAC systems or different things that use either UV rays or some other things that would be permanent, things that would be installed in the facilities that would be ongoing disinfecting of more permanent nature, not like a solution, like a spray solution or cleaning materials and stuff. So where Jeremy's looking into that, Dan's looking into that, and I think some of that stuff may need to be purchased.
So it would basically be doing our very best to provide a healthy environment for our customers, our members.
Absolutely, and employees. And it would be the thought is that would take the place of fitness equipment in reinvestments this year. So.
Yeah. Okay. One other quick thing. The other thing in terms of this budget that I was not only talking about the safety issues, but also some of this, if we don't do it, it's going to cost us a lot more as things continue to deteriorate. It'll cost us a lot more next year, the following year, et cetera. That's it.
All right. Anything else on the capital budget? All right. Is there a motion to adopt the modified capital budget, $8 million? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Andy,
Second.
Andy,
Yes.
excuse me.
Yep.
I think the point that was made before about taking a look at the operating budget would be a good idea, so that we have a rounded portrait of both before we vote on anything.
Okay, we can do that.
Yes.
So we ready to move on to the operating budget then? Susan?
Okay. So one thing I should have said earlier too is
Susan, just a second. Board members, please remember to mute your mic if you aren't speaking. It prevents a lot of the feedback. So, Susan, your turn.
Okay, sorry about that. So we, as you know, we're working on a financing proposal that is a $20 million term loan and a $20 million line of credit. So when we get that term loan, the $20 million, we will not need all of that to pay off the Bank of America line of credit. I think we anticipate $9 million of excess there. So we are going to set that aside as the beginning of some cash reserves for the Columbia Association. So I should have said that. I apologize. Okay, so on the capital, on the operating, you had asked for two or more scenarios, and what we did was two, because one, you could do $1 million and we don't have enough time or staff. So this is the first column. It's set up in the format you're used to, as all of our income statements or statements of activity show. This is a CA-wide presentation. I can give you the annual and then show to you quarterly, if that's helpful. These are dollars and thousands. So the column A, or column C, is the FY21 original approved budget. This was the budget that you approved in February with the modifications that you made that night. So this is exactly what was approved. And I'm going to slide down here so you can see the bottom line. So.
Yeah. Susan, before you go on, just so I know what I'm looking at, are either of these two scenarios, if the board said we're going to choose A or B or whichever, staff feels like it could live with, or is one of them unacceptable to you all?
Well, I think it would be better for me to explain what they are, and then you'll see that that's probably not the question. Let me explain what they are.
Okay.
So if you're just going down to the bottom line, the increase in net assets, this is again the excess of revenues over expenses for the fiscal year, was board approved a budget of $3,000,003, $3,003,000. So in column B, we're calling it proposed one, creative name, is we had showed you some of this last, or a first draft of this on April 9. This was assuming that we start reopening in early July 1. So this is a phased approach to opening. This is assuming for the annual charge that there will be significant abatement requests, primarily commercial, and that there will be some abatements or value reductions in residential as well. So this is our best guess based on what we think could happen. And again, no one knows when we're going to reopen. I want to reiterate also that we've been tracking the county and the state's communication about their real property taxes, and they have not mentioned any changes to that yet. We don't have the value file. We get the data file from the state. We haven't gotten that yet. We usually don't get that till near the end of May. But this is our thing. This proposed one assumes that schools will not go back into session this year, and it assumes that we would not do any camps until July. And so that's the tuition and enrollment reduction there. Memberships, that's, direct memberships are the ones for a single facility. Membership allocations are memberships for multiple that give you benefits at multiple facilities. We anticipate a reduction in them. We have them starting, I think, at about half, and then increasing very slowly. I don't think we have them at 100% for the whole fiscal year, 100% of what the previous budget was. Reduced fees, again, those are bulk greens fees, personal training, all those things, reduce them significantly. We started at 15% in July and August, 30, 50, only getting up to 85% by the end of the fiscal year. Those are the main changes there. Rental income are part rentals and facility rentals, so they're the commensurate decrease as well. So under the proposed one, phased opening starting in July, and this assumes 9 outdoor pools opening the July 4th weekend. We would have a reduction in revenue of just under 17% or $13.3 million. So you go down to look at how we would offset that from an expense standpoint. This contemplates or includes the phase 2 or part 2 of our personnel cost reductions. I believe you got the information on that, where with a combination of layoffs, furloughs, and pay cuts. This is through the first pay in July. So it's 5 pay periods, 2 in May, 2 in June, and 5 paychecks, 2 in May, 2 in June, and 1 in July. And this also reflects the cutting in half the 401k contribution, and then the corresponding impact on payroll tax. So then from operating supplies on down, this is reflecting the reduction in open times. If we were not open as for the whole year, we would have certain reductions, but it also includes some deliberate reductions, like reduced consulting, reduced contracted open space maintenance. We do show the reduction to the community association grant by the same percentage as the annual charge, which is still a fraction of the total revenue reduction, and reduces the grants. It only maintains, I think, the grant to Inner Arbor and half of the grant to the Community Foundation and some other smaller grants. And then what you can see here too, where my cursor is now, you see a reduction in depreciation expense of $739,000. That reflects the delayed capital spending and the reduced capital budget for FY21. And you see, unfortunately, the only number that goes up is interest, and that's because of the increased borrowing. So we would get to, under this scenario, thinking we'd open starting in July, $247,000 of revenue greater than expenses. So I'll stop there. Do you want to ask questions about this one before we do the next one, or you want me to go through the second one first?
Why don't you go through the second one, Susan?
Okay.
That way the board has both of them to.
Okay. I should also have said that in the personnel costs, in addition to what I mentioned before, it also says no merit increases. So CA doesn't do cost of living increases. We only do increases based on merit. We eliminated those entirely for FY21. And we would not do the compensation study that was in the budget. And I think that's it. Okay, so the second one assumes, proposed to, here in column G or column C, that we would not start our phased reopening until September 1. So if the governor didn't have fitness clubs and recreation centers and pools in one of his early phases, then this would be the more likely scenario. We reduce the annual charge a slight bit more because still concerned about those commercial abatements. It's a further reduction in tuition and enrollment because we would do no camps. And we would just expect, maybe realistically or unrealistically, that the schools would open as scheduled on August 25th, and we would start with the school age services program back up again. Because this would have us not opening until the 1st of September, we would go another 2 months with no membership billing, hence the reduction in the membership numbers. Also, no fees because we would not have the personal training, tea time, sport time, and all those things. Let's see. And that's on income. Under that scenario on the expense side, we would continue the furlough period, we'd extend it for another 4 pay periods. That would be 2 more pay periods in July. So there are 3 for CA, there are 3 pay dates, I'm sorry, for the same periods, paycheck dates in July this year. So this scenario, September 1 opening, would mean we would continue the pay reductions and furloughs through July and August, which would make it a total of 9 paychecks impacted versus 5. And that's the big difference here. This would obviously assume no outdoor pools would open because we wouldn't open them Labor Day weekend. We wouldn't be able to staff them anyway. This scenario also, let's see, let me check my notes here, sorry. It eliminates all the grants to outside or partner entities. It postpones, it reduces the technology projects a little bit. It takes the multi-factor authentication out and pushes that to 22. It assumes that we would not maintain or reopen Fairway Hills as an 18-hole golf course. It would have it just being open for a driving range and putting green. It assumes, in both scenarios, assume that Supreme Sports Club would no longer be 24/7, and that this scenario also has the other fitness clubs closing, or all fitness clubs closing a couple hours earlier a day. And it just also assumes, so we start getting the outdoor pools ready in like March, April. We start recruiting and hiring lifeguards in January. This scenario assumes that we would be planning and we would open 14 pools in May 21 next summer, and shows that in a little bit of a cost savings impact in these numbers for that. Let me see if there's anything else before I open up the questions. So those are the big differences. So in response to your question, Alan, it's less about what somebody can live with, as opposed to what one thinks is going to happen. I think.
I see that. Thank you.
All right, Susan, you ready for questions?
Sure.
All right. Start with Nancy. Nancy, any questions?
I heard about the annual charge will be reduced by the percentage that we would collect an annual charge. I'm not sure why you expect we will be losing so much in annual charge. Can you talk about that?
So we know, we've already seen, so we see commercial properties, commercial owners asking for abatements based on the impact that this situation, this crisis is having on them. So just as we've asked for rent abatements from our landlords, they're going to be looking at reductions in their property values. So that's the bulk of that reduction there. For the mall, for example, the mall has been closed since mid-March. Yeah. That's the single biggest annual charge payer. That's they're certainly going to go to the state and try to get something. And we've had that, like Metropolitan, MFLAC, those buildings have, when they get valued at a certain value, they've already gone back before this happened and gotten abatements and reductions in the value based on the slow and projected, I guess, rates.
Lynn?
And also, Nancy, when it comes to the commercial properties, and Susan can help me with this, is that, as you know, the value of the commercial properties is tied to their occupancy level.
Right.
Right.
Lynn, any questions?
No, I'm just looking at this dire net sales prediction, things like that. And hopefully we will be coming out of this at some point within the next year.
Janet, any questions?
None at this time, thanks.
Shari, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question about the camps. The camps are such an integral part of our community's planning as far as employment is concerned. And as we hope employment opens up, or certainly as far as our first responders are concerned, the camps might be very important as far as providing support to those families. Why would the camps not be able to open if other things are opened? In other words, I think what I'm thinking about is that might be a different category from schools.
It very well may, but right now it's not. So, and we do know, we the child care we submitted an application to be a child care center for first responders and medical people, and they said they had enough, so they were not going to pursue that with us. So whether that's the case in the summer, I don't know. I mean, yes, certainly many people use the camps as child care. So we would think that as employment comes back, as long as camps are not specifically prohibited, we would open them. But at this point, it's children's activities. Nobody's doing anything.
Yeah. The other question I had with what you said about occupancy levels, as far as commercial was concerned, how would you're expecting occupancy levels will go down because there are so many more apartments coming on board? That was one of the things that certainly informed our first discussion around these budgets. Are you saying that you don't see that happening, that those rentals are not going to happen?
I would be shocked if the Juniper, for example, filled at anywhere close to the rate that Howard Hughes originally projected. But I think the greater issue is with the retail and perhaps somewhat occupancy, as some of these businesses close for good, and we know they will in the mall and at other places. You know, all of these apartment complexes have retail on the first floor. So
Right.
either those that are not yet filled, where the retail operation hasn't started, they're not going to start a new business now. So I do feel that the risk is on the commercial side.
Okay, thank you.
Rafia, any questions? Alan, any questions?
Yes, I have, I think 4, and not all long ones, one long one probably. Just a question, you talked about abatements. Are these requests for abatements our decision, or is this like a state thing that if they get an abatement on their value from the state, that just automatically affects what we can charge them?
So what that means is that they request an adjustment, a reduction in the appraised value or the assessed value of the property. So that value is what the annual charge is calculated. It's
But
reduced.
they're not requesting it from us. They're requesting it from the county, I guess.
Right.
From the state.
Okay, so it's not our decision. We just have to follow along with it.
State. Well, it's not even that we follow along. It's the value that we get will be lower.
Right.
I understand. So that just impacts us. Help me understand why, if things are opening, and assuming that things open and we start charging members, fitness members back, why reduce hours in like Supreme Sports or other facilities?
To save the cost. So there's very, we would be open, we would be trying to, so if you can, as you see, we anticipate losing more revenue than we can cut expenses for. And so this is to try to close that gap a little bit. The club's opening time doesn't correlate to the membership revenue.
No, but in general, the membership revenue, I know that's not exact, covers the cost of the fitness. So eventually it all comes back in line. But I get you. Thank you.
But hey, Alan, if I may just quickly respond to that, you remember also we talked about in my conversation with the department directors is that we don't know what human behavior is going to be. And so, sure. Yes, they may open, but am I going to willing to go back there? Also, just the essentials of life. Is that a luxury? A membership?
Sure, I understand. Thank you. I just want to make sure we're clear. If things change, as things change, because they're going to change. Obviously, what do they say? One of my new favorite saying is, "Planning is essential. The plan is worthless," because things change after one makes the plan, but the planning is essential. So as things change, for example, if let's say camps were allowed to open, but we had approved a budget that didn't have camps opening, because we had already approved the original budget, would the thought be that this would be a management decision to decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and open them, or would you feel like you need to come back to us for a new budget agreement?
So for that scenario, I would say that we would that would be a management decision. But I would also say that I think that we should. The organization, needs a budget to start the year at least. We need something. So I would say that you need to approve a budget. But the reality is, it's very likely that we would come back to you in the first quarter once we know when we're going to open and say, okay, here's the guidance now. Here's what we know we can do. There are material changes. We would like you to review and decide and see what you think, and then approve an amendment to that budget. But But I think for camps, I think anything going on the upside, I would say it would be smart to just let us respond quickly and affirmatively to that as a management decision.
Okay, thank you. To the annual charge and the village share of the assessment, I may be reading this wrong and I may have missed something you said, but if the annual charge revenue is only expected to go down, let's say 8.5%, why is the community association grant share? Never mind. I transposed rows. I went up a line and saw 18.93. My mistake. I'm good to go. Thank you.
Renee, any questions?
Yep. So if we can go back, can you go back, whichever, I don't know what's up and what's down. So if I look at tuition and enrollment, no, well, let's wait a minute. Let's go to direct memberships for a second. You have them going down about 19%. So when are you assuming that they're going to open? I'm a little bit confused how we're getting to these numbers.
So this 19%, this first pass is
right.
We would reopen July 1.
July 1. Okay, that's good. So if I assume then that there's no income for May and June, that's a 16.5% reduction in income. And I'm looking at a 16 to 20% unemployment rate. So I'm not sure how, on a best case scenario, I'm going to get to that number. So do you understand where I'm having a hard time getting to your best case scenario?
No. Yes, I do. I don't understand. Can you?
Well, what I'm saying is if I just close for 2 months, that's a 16.5% reduction in direct memberships. Right. And then I'm looking at right now, economists are saying we're between 16 and 20% unemployment rate. And if you take into account human nature, which says, I personally am not going to go to the gym this summer, so I'm going to put my membership on hold, then I'm not sure where you get to a 19% reduction. I think the reduction is going to have to be greater, even on a best case scenario.
So we have 19% for direct and 24% for the allocated memberships.
So you're saying 21%?
Yeah, on a consolidated basis. And is that 16%, is that the unemployment in Howard County?
Well, they're estimating right now it's somewhere between 16 and 20%.
In Howard County?
In Maryland. Okay, and I know that, it may be not as high here or it may be higher, depending upon who you talk to. We won't know that until the middle of May. But, you can only go on guesses. I'm just trying to understand how you're getting to the numbers.
Yeah.
So then,
got to them.
Pardon?
That's how we got to them if we were not closed, they would be closed till July, and we would reopen in July with half of the membership revenue, ramping up gradually to, I think, 85% by next May.
By next May?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then, okay, so let me ask you, how are we going to charge? Are we going to have memberships then that just are outdoor pool only memberships if we open?
So we almost essentially do, because we have the play membership is $320 for, a membership. So that was what the outdoor pools membership was. So.
All right. So that's going to stay in place like that. Okay. And then I have one other question I'm just trying to understand your
right. So we didn't make any changes to the membership structure. For one thing, we would have a very difficult time actually making that happen with half of our staff.
Right. So my last question is, if they allow us to open, or when they allow us to open, and they have, as they're talking about social distancing measures still inside of a gym, are we going to be able to charge the same amount if we can only let people use like every other piece of equipment, or have to limit the number of members in the building?
Well, I think that goes to your earlier comment about who's going to want to be there or not. Some of this is going to self-select out. And so I think that we can. We still have the same facilities. And I see your body language that you don't like that, but
I just put my calculator down. That's all.
But also, Renee, I would say that we have asked, and Dan has been asked to look at what the industry is doing also, understanding that we're modeling our best guess on what the industry is looking at. Yes, we have to acknowledge there's going to be social distancing, and there's probably going to be fewer people allowed in those facilities.
Right. And I'm okay with that, Milton. I'm just asking so that I can understand and I can explain to my residents why things are happening.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's all.
And we can help with that. I mean, it'll be clearer and clearer as the health department guidance comes out, I think.
So is it possible, Susan, that we can get a copy of your assumptions that went into this so that we can better understand them as we go forward?
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
As long as everyone understands that I can't be held accountable to them as their guesses, but we're doing the best we can.
Can you go down to the expenses again so we can see those? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dick, any questions, Dick?
Yes, Alan, actually not a question. Alan's comment about planning, I kind of rang a bell with me. I've been watching some documentaries on naval battles, and they say you always go into a battle with a strategy, but as soon as the first shot is fired, the strategy changes. And that's the situation we are in right now. We cannot predict the future. And I think, I'd like to see Susan's assumptions, but they're just assumptions. There's no way that we know what's going to happen. Now, we have two scenarios, depending on things that happen that we have no control over. When we vote tonight, what exactly are we voting on when it comes to this budget?
So I would say that you would be voting on what you think is the most likely scenario to start the fiscal year, with the understanding that we will revisit it in the first quarter when we know what the governor says about this current mandate.
Yeah, well, my guess as to which is the better scenario or the more likely scenario is certainly no better than yours, and you've been studying this probably a lot closer than I have. So I'd like to know which scenario do you think is the most likely?
So I think to start, we could start with the July 1 and then adjust if we needed to. Okay. And this is hard for me to say, though. You know,
I like that idea. I think that makes sense.
I'm kind of pessimist, though, and
well, we will have time to revisit that, but for the sake of getting a leg up on what we have to do, that seems like something that makes sense. So let's assume that that's going to happen, and let's revisit it when we see what actually does happen.
But I just want to point out, if I may, I'm sorry. The second scenario proposes something pretty dramatic with Fairway Hills, and you might want to just think about that in that scenario.
Well, I've been doing a lot of walking in Fairway Hills recently, and I think it'd be a great place to put in some pathways.
Well, Dick, if I may, both of these scenarios are just two scenarios for this time and moment. My conversation with the department directors, we're looking at 18 to 2 years out. And so this is not going to stop. We're going to continue looking at this.
Oh, I'm sure. And that's what we expect. I think you have to keep looking at it because it's unfolding at its own pace. And we have no idea how people are going to respond. I expect some huge social changes in this country in the world after we get through the other side of this thing. So I appreciate the work you're putting into this and the thinking that's going into it. But let's do it a month at a time or a couple months at a time and see how things develop. And but let's go with the more optimistic scenario at this point.
Susan, I have a
Jenny?
question.
Janet?
I'm curious if we went in with I mean, I'm a pessimist when it comes to stuff like this. And quite honestly, I would rather go in with the worst case scenario and work up. But my question is, if we thought about that approach, what suffers in the short term? Like, what would be different in the next 2 months when we don't know anything? Anything?
The thing, Fairway Hills, we would be deciding. We would need to decide. Well, let's see. The main cost of that is maintenance, and so right now we're maintaining it as if we would reopen. So we could go with the second scenario, and I actually think like you, Janet, on that. It's a lot easier to start hard and ease up than to start easy and hard. But we would just be, I think, making a decision to maintain Fairway Hills for 2 more months, and then making that hard decision at the end of the first quarter when we know whether we would be reopening or not. But right now, that's the biggest issue.
Susan, doesn't the second scenario also assume that there will be no outdoor pools open this summer?
Yeah, but for the first couple of months, she was asking that we were not having them open till July anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I have my answer to Dick's question is what we're really voting on or should be thinking about are the assumptions. Because I think I haven't said this yet, but I commend Susan and the rest of the staff. I don't know, getting into this level of the numbers is daunting work. And you've done a great job at piecing it all out. But I guess, and I know you said some of it, but what are the basic assumptions that underlie this? Besides, when we're going to open is sort of an assumption, but it's really just a guess. But and I was one thing specifically. It seems to me we could pull out Fairway Hills as a separate decision in either scenario. We could say, even if we open in July, Fairway Hills is going a different direction.
That's true.
What are the overall assumptions that you're making and what were some of the alternatives to those assumptions that you thought about? Because those are the things I think we really at our level as a board ought to be thinking about.
So let me just get corrected here. So there are other things in the second scenario. There will be deeper staffing reductions in sport and fitness, I think, at least. And obviously, if we didn't do camps, we would have deeper, furloughs and stuff. So there's definitely staffing reductions. And so what I pulled up here is a quarterly look at this, which I should have showed you before I got distracted. So where my cursor is now, this is showing me Q1 salaries under the first scenario, and here are Q1 salaries in the second scenario. It's reduced. Now I do think probably 700,000 of that is, well, no, that's the whole year. Never mind. It's mostly sports and fitness. So to Janet's question, there are we would probably do a little bit deeper personnel cuts in the first or in the first quarter than we would under the first scenario. And as far as like some of I think I went through the base assumptions. So Alan, you were saying what kind of things do we evaluate and not consider?
What were the alternatives? I mean, like we could say, well, I'm not proposing this. We could say we're going to shut down camps. We're not going to have them anymore, and that's something we could decide. Whatever, this looks like a very balanced. We'll sort of take cuts everywhere, Is that an assumption, or was the assumption that there are things that could be on the chopping block? Whatever.
So we try to, when you start, you look at the biggest things first, where are the biggest possible reductions? And obviously, for an organization like CA, it's in personnel costs. So we challenge everyone to look at their departments and to, make reductions. Now, in some cases, there are things that would be reduced hours. We'd only open the sports park on the weekend, for example. We would reduce perhaps the hours that the archives is available to the public. We would eliminate the tickets that service that we do here, and that's not even reflected in here. But this includes no towels, for example, at least until January, because no employee is going to want to touch them, and they're
right.
Hygiene nightmare. So we didn't. You can make a decision about camps, like you said as an example. But really, the timing of this crisis is probably going to take care of that for you. And you can make a decision about camps in the future, any time, because if they're not happening now, that decision's made for you.
Well, I guess the other one that comes to me, and I'm absolutely not proposing it, but I know that staff has been feeling for a long time that we have too many pools. And you propose that even, at least under the second scenario, even for next year, only open 2/3 of the pools, or just about. You could have said, we would propose that as part of this that we eliminate the pool. So there are other things that you, or is that your way of eliminating them, is to propose that we don't open them and then we get used to being without them, and then so I'm just interested, not in all the details of your thinking, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the pools, and it's hard for me to not do it like kind of as you prompt me specifically, but so with the pools, with 9 proposed for this July, getting them open is an enormous lift, and staffing them and just the repairs that need to happen, we will not be able to get done with either our resources or the time that we have. So we opened 9 this year, but then we talked about say the governor says, okay, you can open pools the 3rd week in July. Well, that wouldn't make much sense to open any of them, honestly, because we would be closing half of them in mid-August anyway. So those kind of decisions, that might be a fairly fluid decision. And then for next year, the thought was we're still going to be constrained on resources. We're going to try to, as Renee said, not spend every dime that we have. And 12 to 14 pools would enable us to do the CNSL, which is an important thing to the community. And so that's kind of what we were thinking there, but it would not tie up resources in pools that are less used.
Then let me try this then. It feels to me, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, that one bottom line operating assumption here, and I don't mean operating budget, but operating assumption that you all had, is that these are budget recommendations looking toward a day when things get back to normal and we're basically back to the original budget, in a sense. That will have caught up. It might not be next year, might be the year after, might be whenever, but the assumption is that CA is going to emerge from this basically the same organization we went in as.
That's not my thinking 100%, because I feel like we will never be that organization. So there will be positions that are eliminated and things that are going to have to change. I don't know that we'll ever get to the same level of capital spending in our careers. So I think some of those things have to go.
Can Can I break in here for a moment?
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
done. Thank you.
then can I go after Sherry?
Since this has been developing into a personal conversation, and I think we need to broaden it to include the rest of the board members. I think what we're seeing are best guess estimates, and not this is within a crisis context. This is not long range, but rather it's short range. Susan has done a great job in projecting out to July and then September without enough science information and enough information about where the country and the state are going. So this just gives us a rounded picture of how we handle the crisis right now. I don't think we need to jump ahead to any of these broader policy types of discussions until we know something more. My question was going to be about staffing. And because we have so many part-time and seasonal staff, if, for example, we find that we can open pools or open camps, you've made the point that we usually start that process, way back. We started months ahead. Would we even have the capability to move quickly to be able to open pools or open camps because of staffing? How quickly could we get ramped up in terms of staffing?
So that was factored into these conversations. So the department directors and I know Dan and Marty worked on that. That's where in part where the 9 pools idea came from here, is that that's what we think we can do that.
Right.
But it would be, under this July scenario, if pools open earlier, we would not be able to do that.
Right.
So that's, you're right. That's going to move. And with the camps, it's very likely that the social distancing would apply. Those camp sessions are going to be smaller. So you would need fewer people for those staffing ratios. We think we could do that. We could hopefully re-engage some of the school age services team members and in those roles in camps. Maybe not. It's a lot different. But those thoughts were thoroughly evaluated in coming up with these things. And then I wanted to say one thing. What we do know from a long-term perspective, and Renee brought on, but we have to do it regardless. We have to be thinking forward about, we cannot spend every dollar that we have. We must build some cash reserves. So we cannot keep, it's going to be impossible for CA to be what it was in any reasonable period of time.
Ginny, you run it. Your turn.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Andy. Just a couple of concerns in terms of July versus September. If we open July 1st, we will have been closed for 3.5 to 4 months, depending on when we open in July. The competition, if they open, if they're allowed sooner, we almost don't have any choice but to try and open in July if we can protect, and Sherry, you always keep pointing this out, health and safety of the customer and our employees that are using the
Andy, could I also jump in, please? I've been trying to get in, but I have not given a chance.
Right. You're next, right after Ginny.
Okay, I won't be that long. So my point is the health and safety, but in terms of our competition and the product, we almost don't have any choice but to try for July, assuming everything is safe, etc. The other thing we have to consider, and our daughter and son-in-law have a gym in Minnesota, and they have no virus problem at all in the little town they're in, but the gym's closed because the governor closed them. But they're very worried whether people even come back right away because of the concern. So not everybody will come back. The other problem is we're opening in the summer. People have a lot of outdoor activities. in the summer. So they may not feel it's, somebody's got a phone that's giving a lot of feedback here. So they may not, may feel there are enough activities outside where they may not want to join the gym right away. So that's going to be a serious problem. The other concern I have, though, in terms of September, we are assuming that we're going to be able to still be open in September and that we won't have a problem with the flu and the virus coming back in October, November. That could really be a second blow for us. So I almost think we should go with the July budget and just keep massaging it as we go along as to what makes sense in terms of what the governor's saying, what's health, what's safety, etc. So that's my my comments.
Rafia. Rafia, need to unmute. Rafia?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, can you hear?
Your turn.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to say this thing, you know, I think that the staff has done as good of a job as they could do. And I truly, with all due respect, very few of us truly understand CA's budget. And we are trying to make a lot of those the comments, which, you know, I can save a lot of time for everyone saying that let's go ahead and accept the budget they have put in front of us. I feel that it is very conservative and it is very achievable. In fact, I know that that I hope that we will even not only end up the fiscal year in a positive number. Right now we are saying negative 57,000, but I know it is because we are expecting a 8.28% reduction in annual charge. If the annual charge is instead of 43.7 million, if it comes even at 41, 42 million, we will be in positive. I just want to make a very big statement for all of our board members. And the thing is that CA is really, as we all know, is a service industry. Our biggest revenue is our annual charge. Everything else costs us money. There is only and only two profitable outcomes in CA's all operations. One comes from the community services, which is from the school age services. The school age services are the only one which usually contributes according to the last, I'm looking at the budget, they are expected to generate a 389,000. Out of our millions of dollars of revenue, the positive impact is coming only from school age services of 389,000. The second positive impact comes from the fitness club summaries, which generates a 651,000. That's the only two profitable or any money making. The rest of the services, as they will be reduced because we are unable to provide it, except for those fixed costs, CA will have to, you know, and what I think that Susan and Jackie and the financial staff has done a marvelous job in coming up with the best estimates they can. So please, with all due respect, I'm just saying we don't even understand the budget to the level we should need to. But when some of you may be surprised because I'm just saying that's only the only operation we contribute to bottom line of CA. The other thing is that CA does generate every year, based on the last year financial statement, around $18 million from operations, which is basically the leftover revenue from the annual charge, which about 15 million is used for capital projects and about 3 million for our debt service. If CA comes up, as Shari has recommended, a good business model where we can go back and we say, well, CA will stop borrowing funds for capital expenditures or reduce funds borrowing in capital expenditures, and our capital expenditures could be limited to the cash we are generating annually, which will contribute even after paying to the debt service of 3 million or so, that $14-15 million capital project is good enough. Or we can say, let's limit our capital projects to be $12 million a year and put away the $3 million a year until we have a $20 million reserve in our rainy day funds or whatever. So you guys can look into the bigger picture. Let's not pick little things like that because I know I have a lot of confidence in Susan and the staff, and they have done a very good job. So that's my recommendation. Take it or leave it. Thank you.
All right, we've had a lot of discussion. We do need to vote because the budget we approved back in February just is not a viable budget. So is there a motion to adopt the proposed capital budget changes?
So move.
Who made them?
Rafia.
Is there a second for the capital budget?
I'll
I'll
second.
second that.
Was that
Sounds like
Nancy
a
or
Yeah,
Dick?
it was
Nancy.
Nancy.
All right.
I got there first, Dick.
Oh, you did.
All right. So, I think I'm going to need a roll call on this one. Is anybody opposed?
Me.
Okay, so I'm going to do a roll call. Jenny,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Shari,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Rafia,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Renee,
No.
Andy, yes. All right. Okay, let's move on to the operating budget. Two scenarios. Someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I do, Andy. I'd like to move that we approve the scenario that begins with July 1st. They need the top of the budget here to see what it's labeled, but one that begins July 1st.
All right, that's proposition one. Is there a second?
Okay.
So
I'll,
move.
Dick seconded that.
Nancy.
I let you have that one.
All right, I will do a roll call for this one again. So the vote here is on approving the first proposition, which is opening in July. Jenny,
Yes.
Janet,
No.
Shari,
No.
Dick,
Yes.
Lynn,
No.
Nancy.
I'm going to abstain on that one.
Okay. Rafia,
Yes.
Alan,
No.
Renee,
No.
Wow, looks like you lost that one.
well, wait a minute, Andy. Yes.
Okay, what was the vote?
4-5-1. Okay, so the motion fails. Any other motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we take the more pessimistic option.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Wait a second. Give me a chance here. I got to write this down.
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear it very well.
Janet, what was your motion?
I move that we take the most pessimistic option.
Option 2.
Yeah.
Or proposal
I
2.
can't see the headers, but yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. Janet made it. Who seconded?
Me. Renee.
Renee. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this is for option 2. Jenny,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Shari,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Rafia,
Abstain.
Alan,
Yes.
Renee.
Yes.
Okay, Andy, he's voting no. He's more of an optimist. Okay, so that passes. 8-1-1. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the village cap reserve discussion.
Well, wait a minute. Can I make a motion related to this?
Okay, what?
I would like to I'd like to move that we revisit the budget after the first quarter.
We don't need a motion. We can choose. We will. Milton, is that okay? We will review the budget after the first quarter.
Yes, and I think in Susan's comments earlier, she said we would be coming back to you.
I would. This is Susan. I would recommend in the first quarter. I think we should revisit it when we know what the governor does.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll revisit either when the governor or the first quarter, whichever comes first.
Okay.
Andy, there was one more question I raised regarding the payment option, and you said we will discuss it at this time.
Your turn, Ralphia.
Okay, thank you. I received, and I think Renee also received calls and emails from a resident of Hickory Ridge who said that he was really concerned. He said he has been paying CPRA's dean or CA's annual charge every year by coming to the headquarters and charging on his credit card. And he said that's the only way he was able to pay the full amount up front, etc. And he was able to do that way until 2018. He said he came on 2019 and he was asked that to pay the additional fee of 2.55% for the credit card. So I did explain to him at that time that that is what the Howard County government does, that, you know, if you are trying to pay their taxes, that there is a credit card charge if you're paying by credit card. And he turned around and he said to me that, yeah, but that is a tax deductible tax. And as far as I know, the Columbia Association lien is not tax deductible and it's not a tax. And he said, what do you guys do for poor people like me? I mean, I'm trying to pay upfront the entire amount and you are now going to charge me, and I've been paying this for years and years. And I did inquire from Susan, and Susan explained to me that about 2 years ago that there was a consulting firm was hired who is the same firm who does these services for the Howard County, and that based on that, you know, we have started to also charge the 2.55%. I inquired from Susan that how many people really are paying. So I wanted to know how much revenue we are getting through that means. So instead of, so she explained to me it was like 152,000 or something, which would be less than, $5,000. No, actually, it was a lot less than that in the loss of revenue. But then I explained to Susan that, however, it is really not loss of revenue. Some of the board members recently has been talking about the credit, which I'm against of giving any credit for prepayment. However, if somebody is willing to pay using their credit card, and if the amount is not that significant, we are really talking about, you know, on collecting $44 million, majority comes through the tax agencies, et cetera, et cetera. Very few people are paying using the credit card. And he really has wanted to make, he said, what is CA doing for poor people? What is CA doing? Why can't you even make it easier? And you know, he really insisted that I bring it to the board. And I explained to him, this is my last meeting at the board. However, I will bring it to your attentions and you take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Rafia. All right. Village cap reserves. Jackie. Hopefully you're still there.
I am here.
Anything you want to add?
Nope, nothing that I want to add.
All right. So, board members, there were two recommendations. One is to waive the cap, and the second is to increase the repairs and maintenance from 1,000 to 2,000 in the management contract. Is there a motion for that?
Can we take them separately, Andy?
Sure, we can take them separately.
Okay, so what is that?
I don't know.
Okay, so I would like to move to accept the change in repair from 1,000 to 2,000 per incident.
All right. Is there a second? I'll second. All right, discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to get in the queue.
Well, Alan, you're first.
Okay. I guess I'm still not quite clear on what village's prerogatives are. If a village right now with the threshold the way it is now, if a village wanted to make a repair that costs $1,500, could they decide to go ahead and do it knowing that they would have to pay for it?
I believe that, yes, they can.
Okay. So just so I understand this last sentence about performing the maintenance more promptly, it's just that it, for those villages who would only pay for it if it was under the threshold, then yes, they wouldn't have to go through a CA approval process, but they could already have been doing this, paying for a repair up to $2,000.
Yes, and that really is focusing on that since repairs and maintenance CA-wide are going to be reprioritized. They may not get what they necessarily want when they want it. So this would be, they would be able to take it upon themselves up to a higher limit without even a consideration of who's paying for what.
Okay, but they could already do it. Okay, and it's okay. Thank you.
Any other?
Nancy. So it's nice that they're allowed to take it up to a higher limit, but is there any hope then that they could reclaim any money from that higher limit? I mean, if they're, let's say they had I don't know, an electrical issue that will cost them $2,000, but because they don't own the building, would they be able to get a rebate on some of that $2,000? Or are there people at CA, like from Open Space, for example, that do some of the work so it would cost them less, whether it's a plumber or an electrician or a whatever?
Dennis, are you there? You may be able to speak better to how that process works.
I'm here. So we don't have any licensed plumbers or electricians on our open space staff. And we would ask if they do work that they use the approved contractors who are licensed and have the appropriate insurances. But I don't see that there'd be a direct rebate if they did an $1,800 job.
So why would it matter if they used your people versus somebody that they could get that might do it for less money, for example?
Well, I'm not sure they'd have the right insurance and be licensed, and they would and make sure they pull all the permits. In addition to which, there might be complications. Let's say they open up a wall, and later we find out that something else went wrong because the wall was opened up. We'd have better recourse against a contractor that we use on a regular basis than some independent that we've never used in the past. Okay. And we do bid out the rates for all of the work that we do for all the on-call contractors.
Okay.
So I'm not sure they'd actually get a better rate.
Okay. I'm obviously concerned about the villages, as I think most of us are. And obviously they're letting people go and they're reducing benefits and all kinds of things like CA is on a much smaller scale, but they're still on the losing end of this as well. They're not able to rent out their buildings. They don't have the income and they don't have the ability, more importantly, to borrow the funds. So that's, and it's all understood. I know you all know this, but it's a big concern. And so I'm trying to find ways that it's not going to end up costing them more money if they have a major repair, for example.
Well, Nancy, keep in mind that this is just giving them the option to do a repair and maintenance up to $2,000. They can make the decision not to do it and make the request to CA. It's just going to be more difficult. The consideration is because we're going to have fewer funds.
Right, right. Well, and it depends on what it is. If it's something that needs immediate attention, then they're not going to be able to pass it on to CA, is my
Also, keep in
expectation.
mind that it's a CA-owned facility, and our focus will always be on health and safety.
Right. Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? Any other questions? All right.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I saw the word a grant again from CA to the villages, the word grant used, and I really would like to change that terminology because it does upset people and it's not helpful to the relationship between CA and the villages, even during these trying times. So maybe we can find another term to use. I saw it in the information that I was looking at today online.
I don't see the word, but
well, I saw it somewhere, and I'll look for it. And
yeah, look for it and let me know.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. So the motion is to raise the threshold from 1,000 to 2,000. All right. I'll take a roll call vote. Ginny?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Shari?
Yes.
Dick? Dick? Lynn?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Rafia?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Renee?
Yes.
Andy? Yes. Dick?
Yeah, my mute was on. I said yes.
Okay. So that passes. All right. The other recommendation was to waive the cap. Would someone like to make a motion to waive the cap?
I move. So moved.
Nancy moved, right?
Yes.
Is there
Okay,
a
I
second?
second Rafia.
Rafia is seconding. Any discussion?
So I would like to offer a friendly amendment.
Sure.
I would like to waive the cap for the entirety of the management agreement.
Oh, that's 5 years.
No, it's 3 years.
3 years.
Second.
Ooh, I'm out. Just
Okay.
a second.
Right. So Nancy, can you accept my friendly amendment?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, so may I say something here? Or go ahead, Nancy, you're first.
I've got nothing else to say. I believe that it should be removed for the remainder of this contract, management contract term, which is 3 years. That's still left on it.
Right.
Reserves will be waived.
All right. Renee?
So my thinking is that, I mean, River Hill actually was approved for an SBA loan that we had to turn down, and we may want to look for other financing options. This allows us to do that without worrying about CA coming in and grabbing any excess funds that the village might have. And it sets us up, I mean, I think that financial solvency is the responsibility of the River Hill Village Board, not of CA, and that CA should not limit the amount of liquidity that each village has, i.e. cash reserves.
Like
Any
to get in
other?
the queue?
Alan?
Yeah, I think this crisis has proven the thesis that villages do need to be able to set their own reserves, and that's why I support this.
Any other discussion? All right, I would say the problem I have with that is this is a significant amount of money going to a number of villages.
But if
they need to build a reserve as well. Just as CA needs to build a reserve, so do the villages, so that if something like this were to happen again, they would be better prepared.
Thank you, Nancy.
Andy, one question.
Yes, Milton.
One question I like for the board. I'm not asking for a response, but at some point, I think the board is going to have to address the growing financial strength of each one of the villages, because that delta is getting wider and wider. There are villages that are much stronger financially than others, and with this happening, that's going to continue.
Well, that could be
I'd like
looked
to
at
get in the
future
queue.
then.
Okay. Nancy, you were saying?
I just that could be looked at in the future. I think this time right now is not the time to look at it, but I think there may be something to what you're saying, Milton, and I wouldn't have a problem with.
Well, that's my point, is that I say it's something that the board should consider, because if you look at the numbers, there is a growing difference in the financial strength of those 10 villages.
Right. I understand.
Can I make one
Andy, can I get in line?
Wait. Okay. Jackie, and then Alan, then Ralphia.
I just want to make one clarification about the calculation. It does allow each village to have a cash reserve. It just limits what that reserve is. So by eliminating it, you're not suddenly allowing them to keep a reserve. You're just allowing it to grow into whatever it can grow into without any kind of limit. That's all.
Jackie, can you remind me what that reserve is currently?
It's 20% of operating expenses excluding depreciation.
Alan?
And I would just say that for me, it's not about an enormous amount of money going to the villages. By approving the management contract, we decided how much was a fair share for each village. And then to rake some of it back just has always boggled my mind. So the time for me to make the change is at the front end, not at the back end. And I want to say I agree with Milton that I think we do at some point, not now, at some point need to address growing inequalities.
Rafia?
Yes. You know, I can say that the villages are getting all the revenue every time they request based on their budget. CA allows them to have that much money, what we used to call grant, and then somehow they think it is their share. Actually, all the lien annual charge is the revenues or annual charge of Columbia Association. Under the covenants and everything else, if you go back and see, it is the first lien of Columbia Association. It is not by each village. And actually, in reality, each village do have their own capability if they need to ever impose an annual charge on the properties. Having said that, I just want to say that the villages always, I've never remember in my 30 plus years that when they requested funds and CA said, no, you won't have that much. They are operating on all CA provided facilities. CA is facing all the capital expenditures of those facilities. If CA gives them the annual grant money or annual share every year, so what happens is that, in fact, it will be so unfair to CA if they all accumulate $8-10 million sitting on their balance sheet, and CA is borrowing the money and paying an interest charge so that they can hold the money. CA is always there to provide what they need. I mean, in other words, I've never seen ever a village came back and say, well, they have no money to operate the capital budget. Now, the excess funds, the reason this is why it was the 20% that if their budget is $100,000 and then they can have up to 120, the 20% addition to their budget to maintain. And that's I think it's very fair. And also I think that, without examining and changing a 3-year contract, I'm not in favor. I understand the situation is pretty bad because of COVID-19. Let's do year by year. And if this is necessary, do it again next year and the year after. But to alternate the contract, I do not agree with that. I think let's go ahead with this year and fully support to allow them to keep the excess fund. And if the need arises, then do it year by year. But please do not change the management contract. Thank you.
Anyone else want to? All right. I'll jump in then. Because I'm looking at the third quarter report from the villages. And as of the beginning of February, the villages had 1.9 million in cash.
All combined.
All combined. Yes, but you see, that's the problem. We're going to add to that another $500,000 to $600,000 so that by the end of April, that figure will be up to almost 2.5, 2.6 million.
Wait,
then we add another year
Yeah.
and another year, and then another year. By the end of the 3 years, we're looking at a significant amount of cash that the villages will hold.
And
And
then
can I just step in? I'm
can make changes.
This is Susan. So that it's not 1.9 million. They actually have $3.1 million.
right.
548,000, to 340. So it's 3.1 million, the same that we had to take out of the risk management fund.
Yeah.
Can I get Nikki, please?
Sure. Shari?
Yeah, I think one of the real concerns, and as we're going through this crisis, we're finding this right now, is that we used to have a contingency fund,
right,
from which the villages could draw under difficult circumstances, and we don't have that anymore. And so this issue of having a cooperative pot from which to pull and not having that anymore was a decision that was made, and it was a big change. Unfortunately came at a very bad time for all of our villages. The villages really do differ in terms of the capability of bringing in revenue.
right.
And without a mechanism in place for some kind of sharing, we're in a very tough spot. We are not able to get loans. We are not included in a lot of the legislation. I really want to thank the staff for working so closely with the village associations, and it was done in very good faith to help out. And we're all very disappointed that that has not panned out. So as we're looking at September, possibly being a time to be able to open up again, that leaves the village associations with almost nothing to fall back on. Some have more, some have very much less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
Right.
Thank you.
None of this is going to address that situation.
But
everybody gets paid exactly what they have.
Yes.
Well, it will if the village associations have made money over time this year, then they have a reserve. Whether it's large or small, they have something that they have earned by putting forward events and being able to do that. And that is significant in terms of planning for next year and the year after. Thank you.
Renee? You were going to say something, Renee?
The only thing that I would like to say is that it makes it impossible for the villages to borrow money if CA is allowed to reach into their capital or cash account or marketable securities and take what they consider to be the excess. And beyond that, it is the responsibility of the board of directors of each village and each nonprofit to set the financial goals and solvency of that entity. And I think for CA to reach in and do that puts us in the place of management and not a management agreement. It makes us part of management of those villages.
Andy, could I get in the queue?
Sure. Susan?
So I think that I know that some of the villages are struggling, but I had a conversation with one village manager who wants to keep making the 6% contribution because they're in so much better financial shape than CA. So I don't think that CA reaches in and grabs the funds back. The agreement is straightforward, and I think frequently, and I know you hate this word, but in grant agreements, there's often a return of excess. And, you know, I know that the villages are important and they have less flexibility, but we just went through a situation with Columbia Association where your employees are really taking a huge hit here and are, it's just a really painful situation that this doesn't help. And we're talking, you know, we're limited to looking year by year, but the villages on whom they're dependent on Columbia Association can make changes for 3 years out doesn't seem responsible to me.
Well, I think that, I mean, for us, we are left with one full-time employee and somebody working 15 hours. That's how we're going to get by. Well, and we may need to borrow money, and we can't do that if the bank knows that CA can come in and take anything over a cap amount.
Anything else?
I'd like to hear from Susan. Could you just please explain that last comment you made about 1 year and 3 years? I don't get why CA is limited to thinking 1 year out.
Because that's what the budget is that we are just presented and approved. So we're planning year by year on this. We could attempt to do a 2-year budget and 3 year do it out through the term of the management contract. But, you know, that's unrealistic for most people, I think. And so to make a 3-year decision for one organization and a 1 year decision for another seems unreasonable.
But I don't know any village that does 3 year budgets. At least I know our village has always done 1 year.
Yeah.
Dick?
Andy?
Yeah, Dick?
I think this is an issue where we need more information. I'd like to be looking at these village budgets, and this is I think this is not something we can vote on right away. I think this is a three discussion, and I'd like to see some numbers to back this up. And I'm also kind of concerned doing this at a time when we're in such a financial flux. We really don't know where things stand. So we need more information, I think, before we can make decisions here.
I think that, in all honesty, I mean, I wrote that memo. I think that we need to let the villages know that we are thinking about this, and we should tell them that they need legal representation in this discussion also.
What if the management contract, what if the excess cash calculation excluded loan proceeds?
I don't know, because I've got a copy of the management contract, and I can't seem to get a hold of all the exhibits to find out what goes with it. So I would like to get a copy of those exhibits so I can see how exactly it's calculated. I know there's a spreadsheet floating around or something.
Have that. We can get it for you.
Yeah, we can send that to you. This is Jackie. I just wanted to say the calculation already excludes any kind of loan proceeds. It factors out anything that is a payable, whether it's short-term accounts payable, accrued payroll, or any type of long-term debt. They've just never had that. So it would automatically already exclude that from the calculation. I also wanted to make a quick comment related to Shari's talking about the contingency fund. That contingency fund was so rarely used that it kept growing exponentially, and out of just prudent stewardship of the community's money, it was dissolved, and the villages have each been getting an appropriate share of that. So it was not in high demand. So anyway, we don't know what anyone is going to look like a year from now or 2 years from now. Certainly at this moment in time, it seems appropriate to waive the cap. But we also, as all governing bodies and looking at all of the community's money, don't want cash in total to be building one place while we're borrowing somewhere else. It's just something to consider.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to move to table this discussion until the next work session, because there are a lot of good issues that have been brought up, and I think we need to do a deep dive into this and come up with a more coherent pros and cons to the argument.
Renee?
Yes.
Andy, if I may.
Yeah.
Renee, you can table the discussion for the topic, but what we have here is just saying that waive it for FY20.
Yeah. Can I speak to that, please? I could see tabling your amendment, but I think we really should vote on waiving it for FY21, which is on the
FY20, Jenny.
I'm sorry, what?
It's FY20.
FY20.
It's for this
sorry.
year.
21.
Which ends in a week, just so we
Which ends
know.
in a week, right.
Right. So what's written here is what I would support, but I think your amendment, it would be nice to table that because there is a need for much more information. And equity issue is important here too.
Well, Renee asked the table, so I have to take the vote on tabling.
Well, table my amendment. I'm fine with that. But I would like it to be on the next agenda.
Just withdraw the amendment.
I withdrew it.
We're back.
All right, we will make sure that the discussion goes on the topics so we can discuss it. All right, so we're back to a 1-year waive, the fiscal year 20. Any further discussion? I'm going to take the vote. Ginny?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Shari?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Rafia?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Renee?
Yes.
Andy, yes. Okay, so that passes. All right, and we will continue this discussion. All right, Chairman's remarks. You have my report. I want to thank Rafia. It's been very nice working with her again. And I'm not sure who else is coming back. I mean, Ginny and Alan have contests, and I certainly wish you luck in those contests. And,
Thank you.
hopefully we'll see you back. But we will definitely have at least one new member from Hickory Ridge. You all saw the Inner Arbor Trust report.
Yes.
All right. Proposed new topics outside of what we just talked about. Anything else? All right.
Andy?
Yes.
Andy?
Sorry. Yes.
There was some interest about putting together a new board member orientation.
Yes. I sent you an email.
Yes, I'd like to work on that.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if there are other board members, perhaps they can send that information to you and we can get a small group working on that.
Great.
Okay, great.
Did you see my email back to you?
Yes, okay, I did.
Good. Thank you.
And I also want to say, Rafia, thank you for bringing in all of your expertise and your experience and your great knowledge of CA. And I really appreciate your commitment to the organization and to the board. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Shari. Can I just take a minute to, I wrote down something, so I will just, if Andy will be kind enough.
Sure.
Thank you. A year has so quickly passed. Among all the expectation I had last year, I could have never anticipated the state of the world as it is today. What has become evident more than ever is the importance of a good neighbor, a neighborhood, a good community. My residency in Columbia is reaching 50 years, nearly half a century. I have been fortunate to not only witness the evolution of our city, but also to participate in it as a CA employee for over 30 years, and most recently as the Hickory Ridge Village Council rep on CA board. Though through the decades of changes, transformation, and development, Columbia has remained consistent in one key characteristic: spirit. The unique spirit, transcending labels and limits, has nourished the roots upon which our community, our city thrives today. We are a city founded on the notions of equality and social innovation, the core of which is trust. Trust in your neighbors, trust in your neighborhood, and trust in your community to enable Columbia to serve as a model of urban living and harmony. Trust is built on relationships, understanding, and familiarity. During my time on CA board, I felt that relationship building is an area on which CA needs to really focus on. It will be worthwhile investment where returns are tangible and easily attainable. A good orientation session for new members, introduction to the board members, the key staff, organized visits to key facilities, and training is essential. On a large scale, I would suggest an annual retreat right at the beginning of the fiscal year, providing an opportunity for the entire board to get to know each other and the CA key staff member participating in finance training and strategy collaboration sessions for the entire board, which should include understanding the fiduciary duty to the organization and Columbia residents. Harmony and coherence among the village representatives will benefit Columbia as a whole, a city of united community associations. Furthermore, handling CA as an ally rather than as an adversary and having trust in CA staff would go far in building trust and benefit for our community as a whole. I so appreciate the trust you have in me and to be part of this group. Thank you very much and keep safe.
Thank you,
Thank
Raffia.
you, Raffia.
Thank you, Raffia.
Raffia, that was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey, Raffia, could you send me a copy?
Yeah, I'd like to have a copy of that too.
Email?
Okay, I will email you right now. Sure.
Yeah, Raffia, send it to everyone, please. That was really sweet.
Okay, thank you. I will. All right.
Okay, we're on to talking points. Janet,
True.
would you like to try?
Oh, absolutely. The board voted to accept the proposed modifications to the FY 2021 capital budget. The board voted to accept, to approve the FY 2021 proposed number 2 budget, or proposed number 2 operating budget. The board approved to increase the threshold for village-funded repairs and maintenance from $1,000 to $2,000. And the board voted to waive the FY 2020 excess cash reserves requirement.
All right, sounds like you got it. Anything else? All right, I want to thank everyone for your time tonight. It's our last scheduled meeting for this fiscal year. Good luck and enjoy your time, and thank you very much. Take care. Meeting's adjourned.